Are you out in Dallas? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm in the Dallas area. Technically, I'm in Richardson right now. I go to school at the University of Texas at Dallas, which is in Richardson. And I'm at my apartment, which is like right next to the school. It's not technically an on-campus apartment, but it's like very heavily marketed towards UTD students.
Right. So, yeah. Well, what's going to college like right now? Are you guys, are there in-person classes? Like, what is even happening?
So UTD did a really interesting thing. They made it to where the professors could decide whether or not they wanted to do their classes in person or online. And almost all of them opted to do online classes, which makes sense because of like health stuff. And so all of my classes that I'm taking are online this semester. It's kind of weird because like I never realized how much time that I'll spend inside if I'm not like forced to go outside. And
Right.
I even like being outside. So it's just strange that like I've spent so much time in my room and I'm like, I need to be intentional about like getting out and doing things and not my room.
Yeah, man. I mean, the burnout from screens is very real, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, especially for what we do, you're already spending your free time in front of a screen, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so like getting outside, I find that I think way better when I'm outside, just walking around. It's also just like a chance to kind of unplug because like it's less of like an eye strain thing for me than it is just like being constantly connected and feeling like I'm always like my attention's always being drawn to something. When I'm inside with my phone and with my computer and stuff, it's like I could be doing anything. Like even when I'm working on music, I could be working on music. I get a notification, open it up. Now I'm texting friends since I'm already on my phone. I'm like, oh, I'm going to check Twitter. And I do that. And then it's just all my time is gone.
It's got to be such a weird experience. What year in school are you?
A senior. It's kind of weird. I'll explain a little bit behind that. So this is my fourth year at UTD, but my first semester of this year, and I'll be done after this semester. How that came about was I was ahead of my degree plan because I had taken like AP classes in high school and was kind of ahead. And so I was like, I'm going to fill in, and I also got a pretty good scholarship. And so I wanted to make full use of that. As far as like getting the whole 4 years worth. And I was like, okay, I'm going to add a psychology minor to my degree plan. So I did that last year and was taking computer science major and psychology minor classes. And then this semester I had signed up for 15 hours of classes and I just saw the workload as soon as the like first week of school started. And I was like, this is not going to be fun if I have a music career that I have to keep up as well as this. And so I was like, it was just weird. I was talking to my girlfriend about it for a while and I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Because like I wanted to take on the challenge of having that much workload because that would like force me to push myself and learn how to balance things, which is a skill that I feel like I need to grow in and want to have later in life. But I was like, this just doesn't seem right. And I felt like if I continued what I was going to be doing that semester with how many classes I was taking, I just didn't feel passionate about a lot of it. Like I chose a psychology minor because it was interesting to me and it's something I like to look up in my free time. But I had to sit back and be like, do I really want to spend like 30 hours a week on this stuff?
Right. It's funny, like, man. I was just talking to a friend about how sometimes, you know, we all have our interests. And like I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, I did a ton of theater. Like I just did tons and tons of theater. And so when I went to college, I just sort of assumed, I was like, I like doing theater. Of course, I'll keep doing it in college. And, you know, maybe this will be like a thing for me. Because I was always pretty good at it in high school and it was always fun. And then I got there and I saw the people who were really serious about theater, like who really were going to go on to be the pros. And, you know, immediately it's like, oh, well, obviously this is not for me. You know?
Yeah, I had that kind of moment of realization when I was in intro to neuroscience class first week. And I was like, yeah, I like learning about the brain and like neurotransmitters and things like dopamine and how they affect the reward system and that kind of thing. But I don't want to memorize all these terms. Right. So I was like, nah. And so I dropped my psychology minor after the first week. And the timing of that worked out perfectly. The deadline to add new classes to my schedule was the Monday of the week after. And I had like just talked about this with my girlfriend. And I went back home to my parents' house. It's not too far from here, like 25 minutes away. And I was like, I'm going to get my mom's opinion on this before I just like drop it just to like see what she thinks. And she was like, yeah, if it's something you don't feel passionate about, go for it. I was like, cool. And then as I was doing that process, I realized that I only had just like a couple CS classes left in my like major. And so I was like, if I like pull this off, what I could do is just take all the psychology stuff off of my semester this semester. And because I don't have to fill that space up anymore, I could just graduate after this one. And so I like put all the classes that I needed into this semester, and then had to like catch up on the first week of stuff, but that's not usually that bad. But now I'm on track to graduate after this semester. And it feels
that's amazing,
weird.
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's really good. I think it's great that you're able to sort of pull it out as, you know, the lockdown is happening. You know, it's good you're not like in the middle of a 4-year program right now.
Yeah.
But it's interesting for me because so on this show, I talk to a lot of people who, you know, went to college and were pursuing a major. And then most of the time when I'm talking to them, it's years after. And, you know, either they decided to pursue that or they didn't. But, you know, generally they ended up with a music career being sort of the primary thing. And so I was really interested to talk to you while you're sort of in it. Like, what is your thought process right now? How are you balancing a music career and academic career? And do you have a plan for where you go with it?
Ooh, that's difficult. As far as the balance thing, that has been an ongoing thing I've been learning for my entire life. But like, I feel like I don't do a great job of it. I get stuck in these like, I tend to focus a lot on like one or the other. And so, for example, there will be like periods where I'm like working really hard on music, trying to finish a project or whatever. And then I'm like neglecting my schoolwork as a result. And then after that happens, I'm like, okay, I need to really get school back on track. So I'm doing that and then not making music. And so it's hard to balance. But like, as far as future plans go, it took a lot of thinking and prayer to figure out what I'm trying to do now, because like, there are so many factors to consider now, especially with COVID making everything so weird.
Oh man, yeah.
Like, it's strange because I was like, over the summer before the semester started, I was like, all right, I really need to figure out what I'm going to try to push for. And it was going to be music, really. And I still did do a lot of music stuff over the summer, but I had thought about it and realized that we have no idea how long it's going to take before it's like, before US opens stuff up, and when it's like safe to do so, where I can actually like play shows and like do that full time. And so I was like trying to go for more of a computer science type thing, because that's not really something that I prioritize. Like throughout college, I always treated it as like a backup thing. And so I haven't really been taking school as seriously as I probably should have, because I've always wanted to make music like my primary thing, and I still do. But like this year, it's been so strange because I was like fully prepared to like temporarily jump into computer science mode. And now I've started getting offers for like drive-in shows. And I'm like, why couldn't I have just done this like last year?
Right. Yeah. The timing of it.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I was thinking about the timing of a lot of stuff when I was coming to talk to you, because I mean, you've been, I don't know how you categorize your style of music, but I think the way it gets labeled a lot is this sort of melodic dubstep label, right?
Right.
And it's funny to me to see you've been doing this for years. And I went back and I listened to some of your earliest stuff, like the earliest stuff you have on Spotify.
Wow.
And even back then, you know, you can tell your production has evolved since then. But even back then, there was that really strong melodic sensibility. And you could kind of just tell that you've been on this wave for a while. And it must be an odd moment, you know, to bring it back to timing again, to see the dubstep scene as a whole. All of a sudden, a lot of people are really excited about, you know, again, quote unquote, melodic dubstep and bringing sort of melodies and harmonies and, you know, just sort of non-atonal sounds, which have been so dominant in dubstep for years. All of a sudden, that's a trendy thing. That's a hot thing. How does that feel to you? Because I could see it either being exciting in the sense of like, oh, finally, like people get it, the thing I've been pushing, or it could be annoying in the sense of like, well, this isn't new. I've been doing this for years.
It's a weird mix of both. Like, it's strange. I started producing in 2012 when I first heard Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites by Skrillex. A friend showed it to me during lunchtime. I was in the cafeteria. He like pulled out his phone. No, he pulled out the Dirty Phonics remix of Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites and had me listen to it. And I was like, okay, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard. And so I think that day I like started a dubstep station on Pandora and then found guys like Flux Pavilion, Dr. P, all them. And I was like, I want to learn how to make this stuff. But like ever since that moment of hearing like Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites, in the back of my head was like, what would this like type of growly sound be like if it was more like chord based? You know? And so like my entire
even back
journey,
then you were thinking like that.
Yeah, because like I've always been into music as a kid. I started playing drums when I was 8. In middle school, when I found out about dubstep and stuff, I was in the band program. I played percussion. By the way, that's where I found out like the sound of the marimba, and I use that in like all of my music now.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I was like, this is a cool instrument. But I've always been into music and like have been into like coming up with song ideas and things like that. I started quote unquote producing when I was probably like 13, and I started Asora when I was like 15, I believe. And so like there was like a period of where I was just kind of messing around with stuff and making ideas that were in my head. And like I always had like a pretty okay grasp of what sounds good as far as like musical ideas, but not really like technical skills. But to go back to the question of like the melodic rhythm thing, that's been an idea in my head for like forever, really. Well, since I heard dubstep, like obviously there was like a starting point where I'd like innovate off of, but I really never got that sound going until 2018, I think is when I started doing that. I just like experimented with sound design, and I found this sound that was really cool where I was like adding. So like a lot of the sound design I do is like manipulating harmonics or like putting effects on things that emphasize harmonics to where it sounds like a chord. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And I like found out techniques like that in 2018 and then like adapted from there, because I was like, whoa, this is the stuff I've been like wanting to do my whole life. But as far as like how it's going now, it's been very interesting. Like it's a weird mix of exciting and also scary in a way, because like it's exciting to see that the sound that I've always had in my head and like I really tried to push and believe in all this time is finally like starting to gain traction. But there's also like the scary unknown side of things where guys like Chime and Ulasail are also doing the same thing, and they are bigger than I am. And I'm like of course music shouldn't be like a competitive based thing where it's like, oh, I got to be doing better than this guy. But there is in the back of my mind the fact that music is a business, and I'm like trying to make sure that I'm kind of established in that scene as like an innovator and like a pioneer of that sound. You know?
Yeah.
And so like it's been really good, I think, for all of us involved, because like we're all having to like work off of each other's ideas and continue to innovate to try to stay at the top, quote unquote. And so I think it'll result in a lot of like innovation and creativity within the scene. So I'm excited about that for sure.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I mean, I would say to that, you know, it's not like, I don't think anyone is taking anyone else's spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I totally get that concern. But then at the same time, I mean, at least to me, and I think to any discerning listener, what you do is different than the people you just named. You know, it's like, obviously all of you guys are concerned with the more melodic side of this kind of music. But I think you all have your own take on it. I think it's pretty distinct. And I don't know, like I was just listening to your new record, the Reset Environment EP. Yeah. And that to me, that seemed like a pretty big progression of the sounds you've been pushing. I don't know if you felt like it was sort of a level up, or whether you just sort of felt like it was just sort of more of the, you know, just more of what you had been doing, more finely tuned. But to me, it seemed like kind of a bridge between your ideas, which had always been really clear, and then sort of the more mainstream, if you want to call it that, dubstep scene, that you had sort of figured out a way to bridge those two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is part of what I did with the EP. The story behind that EP is so strange. Like, I don't know if you'd believe it, but most of the ideas in that EP are a year and a half old.
Oh, I believe that, yeah.
Yeah, I'd started that EP like a year and a half ago and then just didn't touch it for a while. I worked on other projects like my Comatose EP that I released with Circus at the beginning of the year. Just other odds and ends like remixes and like stuff like that, singles that I had released on labels that asked for music. And then I finally came back to the Reset Environment EP over quarantine, actually. And I was like, okay, I really need to finish this now that I have the time to do so. School is less of a burden. Like, I got to do this. And so it was really hard to finish it because like it's a very concept and like theme based EP. And that's how I write a lot of my music. I want to like make sure that the theme really comes across in what I'm doing and it doesn't just sound like another collection of tracks, you know? And so there's a lot of like thought that had to go into that. And there's also just this like block in my mind of not really wanting to finish it. I think that could probably be like perfectionism to an extent, but like, I don't know. It was just really difficult for me to like sit down and finish it for a number of reasons. I got kind of uninspired with it for a while because I was like, this is like old sound. I've been doing newer stuff since then. Right. And like wanting to get the theme perfect and all that. And so it was difficult, but like I just kind of chipped away at it track by track and then finally finished it. And I'm really happy with how it came together.
Yeah, man, I really like it. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the concept behind it and that you have concepts behind a lot of your records. And I think it's just sort of rare for dubstep artists to have that concept forward approach. You know, like you've got songs like what I just listened to, Self-Love and Self-Sabotage, which is kind of like a dual flip side of a coin kind of tracks, which I really liked. And, you know, for you, like, do you need a concept to write music? Does it help you? Does it usually come before the production or does the production inform the concept?
So usually I will have a concept in mind that I want to express, and then I will create tracks that kind of express that concept in my mind. But I can also just like put ideas down and then get inspired by them as I'm making them, and then come up with a concept behind it, or even not like a concept at all. I released a track with Disciple Roundtable like a month or so ago called Glass Cannon. That one wasn't really inspired by anything in particular. I was just having fun with sound design, messing with synths that I hadn't used before, or hadn't used much before, to clarify. And like, there wasn't really anything special behind it as far as like the meaning, but I still had fun making it. And so I do find that my stronger, at least to me, tracks do come from like having a concept in mind beforehand and then working off of that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I mean, to me, that's rare for dubstep. I'm not the foremost authority on dubstep, but like, to me, what I see is a lot of bangers, and it's a lot of sort of in the moment kind of sounds, right? Yeah. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing, because you know, dubstep, to me, a lot of it is concerned with sort of the absolute bleeding edge sound design, experimentation, you know, pushing technology, that kind of thing. And so a lot of it is just like, look at this cool shit I just made, you know, that you've never heard before, which is fun and that's exciting. But then, to me, I've been talking to a lot of people lately about timeless music and what makes something timeless or classic, or, you know, just music that you go back to. And I think there's always that concept behind it. Mm-hmm. All the stuff you end up really getting attached to. You said you heard Skrillex and that kind of flipped a switch in your brain. Right. But, you know, leading up to that, like, where do these tendencies come from? Because if you played drums, did you play other instruments? How did you know about melody? How do you know about arrangement? How did you come to that?
Okay, that was mostly from band in middle school. Because I was in the percussion section. The percussion instruments aren't only drums. Like, you play things like the snare drum and the bass drum, but there's also the keyboard instruments like marimba, xylophone, that kind of thing. And so we were taught our like scales and stuff like that. I didn't really learn about chords much until high school. That's when I actually learned what those were. But learning my scales and stuff, I just, like, music was always something that kind of made sense to me.
Like, just naturally?
Yeah, because I grew up around a lot of music. Like, my dad, he played guitar for a lot of his life. My mom sings in the church choir, stuff like that. There'd always be music playing in the house, that kind of thing. And so, like, just growing up around music made me develop a love for it. And then
what kind of music was being played around you at the time when you were a kid?
Okay, so as a young kid, like, my earliest memories of hearing music was smooth jazz playing in the car, like when I was 2 and 3. As I was in like elementary school, my mom usually plays like hip hop, Christian hip hop stuff or gospel music. And then my dad would play like Christian rock and metal. And so I grew up listening to like a pretty wide range of music, but I definitely tended to gravitate more toward like the rock metal side of things than like the hip hop side. And so I listened to bands like, I'm not sure if you'll like know them, but Skillet, Red, a band called Disciple, Demon Hunter, those kind of things.
Okay. So, yes, I've heard of Skillet and maybe one or two of the others. I'm not super familiar with the music.
Right. But yeah, I think those are my main musical influences in the beginning of my like life. And then midway through elementary school, we had a gym membership at this place called Lifetime Fitness. It's a pretty popular one.
Oh, I know Lifetime, yeah.
We had one of these, like one of the, I guess they're not like teachers. I guess we called them teachers at the time, but like people that would be in like the child area, making sure everything's going smoothly. One of them would like every few weeks or so bring out this like big machine for Dance Dance Revolution and put it in the gym.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And so I found out about electronic music through that. And I think that's where my love for electronic music started. And then finding out about Skrillex really like pushed it over the edge into where I like wanted to make that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's hilarious, man. Yeah. So they would actually bring out like a DDR pad?
Yeah. And I was just like, this is the coolest thing ever. I had so much fun with that. Speaking of, like after that, like they had one of like the big metal ones, like the ones you'd find in an arcade. Right. I went to my parents and I was like, I really, really want this game. And I had a PlayStation 2. And so I think we went to like GameStop at one point and like got one of those like plastic dance pads that you would like plug into the PlayStation. And then I bought two of the Dance Dance Revolution games. It was DDR Max and DDR Max 2. And I played those so much as a kid.
Okay. I love those games. It spawned this whole subculture where people are making their own. Has anyone made a DDR track for any of your music? I bet they have.
I'm not sure about DDR. I have seen maps for Beat Saber for my songs.
Okay.
Someone made one for Flow. I saw it on YouTube and it's like ridiculous. I was at a friend's place and like, I think you can only download the custom songs on a PC, but he had a PC with Beat Saber and VR. And so I tried to play like the Flow map, but it is too difficult. I can't do it.
You can't even do your own song.
Nope.
I love it. I've got a friend who's a video game designer out in the Bay Area, and he just bought a full DDR arcade game to put in his garage.
That's awesome.
And that's like, that's his like quarantine workout, is he just goes in there every day.
Yeah, it is a workout. I consider it more of a workout than actually dancing.
Oh, absolutely. That's actually an interesting question. Are you much of a dancer? Because
No.
I feel like, that's the funny thing, man.
Like,
there's few producers who are good dancers. There's a few, but not many.
I would not consider myself a good dancer. Like for most of my life, I just have like memories of going to school dances in like high school and being like, I don't know what to do with my arms or my legs. Like, what do I do? I think over time I've gotten a little bit better having like played shows and stuff. Cause like there comes a point where you're like, okay, I'm not moving on stage. I need to change that because that's boring and I want to like bring energy. And so like figure out stuff like, full disclosure, I'll like go in the mirror and just like jump around listening to music, figuring out like what I could do and like on stage. Yes,
that's smart. That's smart. Like, yeah, maybe someone will laugh hearing that, but no, man, that's what you got to do.
The truth.
Oh yeah, man, because you never know what you look like until like there's definitely videos and pictures of me on stage that it's the most embarrassing thing in the world, right?
Yeah. I played my first show in like August of 2018. Yeah, that's right. I'm gonna make sure that's the right year. But like, it was weird because I had practiced DJing like 2 years before that, because I bought a DJ controller with the money I had earned at like a part-time job at Chick-fil-A. That was like the first big purchase I made.
And how old were you?
Oh, I was 18.
Okay. But you had been producing for years before that.
Yeah. DJing was like the new skill to me at the time.
And then so what happened? You bought the controller.
And then I'd like practice mixing. It took me a little bit to get a grasp of like making transitions smooth, finding out what kind of tracks work together. But like I had the DJing stuff pretty much down at that point. And then I entered a remix contest for like a local DJ. His name was like Blood Brothers. And I saw a Facebook post, or no, he might have messaged me on Facebook. He's like, hey, I'm doing a local remix contest. And I didn't really like, one of the prizes was like $50 and then some other stuff. But the only prize that I was really interested in was a show with a like promotion company in the area. And I was like, okay, I'm a pretty okay producer. I'm going to go for this. And I did it and got first place. And so I ended up playing my first show with them. And I like did a lot of prep work to make sure that I was like all good. I had never used like CDJs before, so I had to figure out what record box was and all that. Right. And then I played the show and it went really smoothly. But on stage, I looked very nervous because I was, and like it just wasn't natural. So over time I had to like figure out how to make it look like I was actually having fun.
Right. Yeah. I mean, do you enjoy the performance aspect of it?
Oh, 100%. Like at first it was kind of weird. It's like when I get in a groove with it, I tend to enjoy it. There's always at first like 30 seconds of a set where I'm super like nervous and I'm like, what are people going to think of it? And then once I start playing music, I'm like, oh yeah, my job is to play music and enjoy it. And so I just kind of relax after a while.
Yeah, well, when you put it like that, it doesn't sound too bad.
It's not. Like, I think there's a big mental aspect of like any kind of performance or even like creation of music. I had an epiphany kind of, I think it was like mid 2019 when I was like playing shows, and like every time I'd play a show, I'd always have this feeling like afterward, it was like, I hope people liked it. And if people weren't really like moving around a lot while I was playing, I'd get kind of upset. But I was like, I had a moment of realization where I was like, it seems like my mindset here is that I'm playing music and trying to get a reaction out of people. But I think it's much more enjoyable for myself and for others when my mindset is like, all right, I'm going to put together a set of music that I really like. I'm going to enjoy it myself. And then when people see you enjoying it yourself, they'll follow suit. And so it's like backwards, you know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's such a funny thing because all of us as artists, you put yourself on stage and, you know, it's basically saying like, look at me, you know, pay attention to what I'm doing. So you're asking people to pay attention and to connect. But then in reality, at least for a lot of artists, that's not how you feel most of the time, right? It's like, I'd rather you didn't look at me. I'd rather, you know, I'm not really trying to be the all eyes on me person. But then for those little moments, I don't know. It's interesting, man. I mean, have you thought as far as just gravitating towards music in general, you know, why that form of art, why that form of connection, communication, why that sort of connects with you better than anything else, why you were drawn to it?
I really don't know. I guess just as I've grown up, I've just found like a fascination with sound and like how sounds can affect the human psyche so much. It's just like it's vibrations in the air. Like, why do I feel like dancing or crying when I listen to music? It's so strange. But like, I think electronic music in particular is like super powerful. Like, because with other genres of music, you've got like a pretty set sound palette. You've got rock where you've got a guitar, a bass, you got drums and a vocalist. You've got jazz where you've got like saxophone, upright bass, that kind of thing. And like with electronic music, I mean, you can limit yourself to like certain instruments, but you've also got so much opportunity to like create whatever you want. And I think it's a really fun thing to explore.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And again, that takes me back to, you know, sort of my perception of dubstep, which is like, that's really what it's all about, right? Is pushing those boundaries. And I think that's something you do a lot in your production. You know, for you, how much time do you spend sort of learning new techniques and really pushing the limits of your knowledge versus sort of focusing in on the tools you have and, you know, really trying to sort of learn 100% of your sandbox, so to speak?
Yeah, not as much as I feel like I should. Most of my time is spent like working with stuff that I already know how to do. And I really want to like push the envelope with my own sound design more. That's something I've been working on. And like, it's weird because like I do have a pretty distinct kind of like not method, but like sound design, I guess. But like,
what is it?
I guess
as much as you'd care to share.
Yeah, I mean, like I'll use effects on an already created like bass sound that I've made, and like just use it to like emphasize harmonics in the sound, or like create a chord like characteristic to it. And I've kind of stuck to that for the last like couple years, and I want to really like go beyond that, or not even go beyond that, but just develop that more. Because I think there's a lot more that I haven't explored with it. Like my mindset with creating music now is like, okay, I've got this song or this idea. I'm going to create it using the stuff I already have. But like what got me to this sound in the first place was just taking time to experiment. And I haven't done too much of that. Like I'll have a really good sound design session once every like couple months or something.
Right.
Where I like develop something new that I put in a lot of my tracks. But other than that, like, it's mostly using stuff I already know how to do, but just using it in different ways. Most of my creation process is more of like concept based now than it is like sound design based, which is kind of strange because like the whole reason this sound developed was because of sound design. But
you're allowed to evolve as an artist, right? We all mature and grow as people. And obviously your art and the way you see the world is going to change naturally over time. Do you have any interest in other styles of music? Do you see yourself, experimenting with, not just different ways of sound design, but different styles, different, methods of creation?
Interesting. I think in general, I'd really like to stick to the whole electronic arena because that's just what I feel like fits me and the stuff I like to listen to. But there's a genre called hard wave that I found out about in the last like few months, I think, or like half a year, something like that. I don't know.
Talk to me about it.
It's like a combination of trance, trap, and like hard style kind of sound design. Like I'd look up artists like Skeller, Skeler, Enjoy, Enjoi, SBU. Those guys are the ones that I kind of found that were doing that kind of sound, and I got like more and more into it as I listened to it more. It's really interesting, and it's like, I don't know, it's got this almost nostalgic feeling to me after having played Dance Dance Revolution, but it's like an evolution of that sound. And I'm like, this is super cool. And I've been incorporating a lot of that style into my newer unreleased stuff. Like I said before, the Reset Environment EP is like a year and a half old. And since then, I've definitely like done a lot of new stuff with like incorporating elements of different genres and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we should talk about, the journey of it a little bit. I mean, you're still in it to a certain extent, but, before you went to college, say you're a teenager and you started getting into production and you're, playing in the school band, and obviously you have this interest in music. How did your parents feel about that? Especially once it started seeming like maybe it's got some legs, other people are starting to notice your music and be excited about it. How did that evolve?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because like most people or like creatives will talk about the fact that you've got to like tune out all the noise around you if people are like not really believing in your dream. You got to believe in yourself. I didn't really have many experiences like that. Like my friends and family have always been super supportive of my music stuff. But my mom, she grew up in a kind of like a poorer situation where she didn't have as much money. And so her mindset about that kind of thing has been like what she had to do to grow up and like be okay financially was to like go to school, like put all of her time and effort into that and then get a really good job, which worked out for her. And I think sometimes she tends to like put that on me where she's like, hey, you should go to school for an engineering field because that makes a lot of money. And like, she's never been one to like put down my music stuff or anything like that. But our mindsets on that are definitely different. Like we grew up in different situations, and I'm realizing that this music stuff is something I could do full time and would love to do full time. But she's like, she seems pretty hesitant to the idea of that. And she's like, you should definitely make sure you get your degree. Right. And I am. But yeah, I've never really had the experience of like people holding me back from my dream or anything like that.
Well, that's good, man. And I mean, it sounds like you've maybe even from a young age been able to to balance? I mean, I know you said you feel like you could do a better job of it, but if you're in advanced classes and if you're finishing school early while still managing to pump out a lot of music and learn production and evolve it to the point where a lot of people want to listen to what you do, I mean, then it seems like from a young age, maybe you've been fairly responsible, organized, would you say?
Maybe. So,
I mean, it's got to be something, man, because not everyone can do both.
I think a lot of it comes down to like the habits that like my parents raised me to have. Like my mom, I remember we had a rule in like elementary and middle school where we just weren't allowed to play video games during the weekdays. And I look back at that, like at the time I was like, man, there's no fair. I want to play Minecraft with my friends. But like, I'm very grateful for that, because things like video games and social media and YouTube, all of that could very easily turn into like a behavioral addiction, to be frank.
Yeah.
And like, I just wouldn't be able to get stuff done with music. And I think that's a big contributing factor. But I've also noticed that like, as time has gone on with getting in college and like doing my own thing, being on my own, I have like things like social media and YouTube and stuff have taken like way more of my time than I want them to. And like, part of that is because like I have to have social media as an artist. Like there was a time when I was making music where I just didn't really care about that, but I'm realizing that that's important. So I have to like do it, and I just get like stuck in it.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's the worst, man, because you're right. We have to engage with it. It's part of what we do. If just to be smart about your career, you have to be in it at least a little bit, but it's literally designed to be addictive, right?
It's the worst. Like the whole news feed, like for those of you that don't know, like social media is designed to be like a slot machine, basically like a gambling addiction. And so social media algorithms are created to like give you things that you really want to see in like sparse intervals. So it's not like you have all of your favorite stuff at the top. It'll be like you see something you really like, then you have to scroll past a bunch of filler, and then you see something that you really like. And so it's created to get your brain, like it gives you little spikes of dopamine whenever you see things you like, and it like makes you keep wanting to like scroll through and find stuff. It's the worst, but it makes some money.
Yeah. I mean, there's people whose job it is to maximize the amount of time you spend on it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like they get paid a lot of money to do that. Maybe that's what we should have been doing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually interesting. I saw on social media, I don't know when, a week or two ago, that you were talking on Twitter about your relationship with Twitter and with social media and how much you wanted to participate, how open you wanted to be, where to draw that balance. Have you had any more thoughts about that?
I definitely have. I've had to take a lot of steps this semester to make sure that I'm not like spending, well, I think that's like two separate questions. Number one, you asked like my relationship with social media, and two, like kind of being more open and stuff.
Yeah.
I guess I'll talk about the first one first. Definitely trying to limit myself as far as like how often I'm on socials, because I'd find myself just like, because it's such a like stimulating activity, I'd be in class, I'd be bored, I'd pull out my phone, check Twitter, put it away for a while, then 5 minutes later, check Twitter again. And then this time I'm like stuck on it for 15 minutes. And it's just like, what the heck? And so having to do things like on my computer, actually, I installed a couple Chrome extensions that'll like block the news feed for Twitter and Facebook. So that way, if I open Twitter to like check messages or something, I don't get stuck scrolling forever. Same with Facebook. But as far as like my relationship with social media, it's been, I don't know, just kind of different. Like, obviously I know I have to like play the game, quote unquote, keep interacting with people's tweets, make sure my name is out there, people see me, they're like, hey, I recognize that guy, like do a follow, that kind of thing. But like, I don't know, I think Twitter in specific is like, I just don't like it as a platform. Like, it's fun to get like these short ideas out, but like it very quickly turns into like an echo chamber of like political opinions that I really don't like. It's like, regardless of what the opinion is, I think it's dangerous to have all these people that kind of subscribe to the same thing. And because they see the same thing over and over again, it reinforces it. Like with any opinion, that can get dangerous really fast.
Sure.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, has that led you to be less open, do you think? Or just not want to engage with it?
I think that is part of it. Yeah. Because like, I guess we'll just get kind of deep with it. Whenever the George Floyd thing kind of happened, I was definitely very saddened by that. And I was just like, man, this definitely, to me, seems like this is a systemic issue and it needs to stop. And I think a lot of people do agree with that idea, at least on Twitter. And then they take it to the extreme of all cops are bad. And I'm like, no, hold on a minute. I don't know if I agree with that. It's just like, I feel like it can be very easy for views to get polarized. Like, on social media, people put you in a box, whether you like it or not. Like, right. I do think systemic racism is a thing as of now. I do not think all cops are bad. And just like things like that, those like, and people,
well, it's hard to express a nuance, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, people tend to polarize things. Like, if I were to say I support the police and I think in general they do a good job of like protecting citizens, people would be like, well, then you don't support Black lives. And then if I say like Black lives matter, people are like, well, you hate police. And I'm just like, no.
Right.
That's not how things work. And like, there's only so much you can like get out in 280 characters or whatever. So
yeah, of course. And I mean, that's sort of the negative of the mob mentality, right? Is that a lot of people feel like their voices are not maybe not marginalized, but maybe just that there isn't a place for their voice.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. On Twitter, it's easy to do that just because like you get people, especially if you follow just like a similar group of people. Like everyone I follow is like musicians or goes to shows and stuff like that. And so anytime there's like a group of people that do similar things, they're going to become more similar as they interact. And so like, I just see the same opinions over and over. And so it's like, if I have anything that differs with this, I can't share it. It's just scary. You know?
Right. Yeah, of course, man. Yeah. And I mean, I've gone through the same thing. I think a lot of people have. It's been interesting in the wake of Black Lives Matter to see a lot more artists get politically involved, or at least start sharing their political opinions or just any opinions at all. Mm-hmm. I think people have tried to make a more personal connection. Right. And even for me, I mean, I absolutely think systemic racism is a fact. And I tend to fall probably a little further than you on the police angle. And, I'm not saying all the people who are police are bad, but to me, it's a corrupt system. I think the system of police is bad and needs to be reformed. But that, for me, where I fall with it is, how can I take what I believe and apply it to the community I'm a part of, which is the music community, right? And for me, that has felt more productive than just sort of trying to shout my opinion while everybody else is shouting theirs.
Yeah.
Is to say, these issues, they exist in our little world, in our little sphere. And, our little world is small enough that we can actually kind of talk in more detail about it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've been trying to do. And, I don't say that to say like everyone should do what I'm doing, but that's where I've felt comfortable and where it's felt more productive for me, is to try to talk about, well, let's look at, how these issues actually happen in this career path, in this industry, in this group of friends that we have, right? Because at the end of the day, the music world feels small, man.
It kind of does, yeah. Kind of like off of what you were talking about with like trying to share opinions in a way that makes sense with like the context of the industry. I've been in a Zoom group with like Black producers that 12th Planet put together. And we've been meeting on Mondays and just kind of like talking about stuff and figuring out things that we can do in order to like, it was around the time when the George Floyd thing happened. And then we just like got together every week after that. But it's just been interesting to hear like people's experiences with the industry and like see what they've dealt with, because like people like 12th Planet, Armani Rain, he's in there as well. Like, we've got a wide range of like older people that have been in the scene for like 20 plus years, and like people that have been producing since they were like kids and are still kids.
Right.
Like, and so I don't know, it's been really interesting to see that. But like for myself in particular, I don't think I've experienced anything that was like weird because of my race within like music stuff, even in life in general. Like there's only one time that I can like recall someone being like quote unquote racist to me. It was in, I think it was 6th grade. Yeah, because I just started middle school. And
Right.
like I was in, for some reason, I couldn't get into like the pre-AP science class. And so I was in like academic science. And like the academic is like the level that most people are in. And so I was taking science and I was like doing pretty well in the class because I tend to do pretty well in school related things. And there's just this one kid, I think he was like jealous of me or something, but we were like both walking past each other. Like I was going to my desk, he was like going to the front of the class or something. And then he like ran into me or something. And then he was like, "Get out of my way, you stupid black person," and literally said black person. And I was just like, what do you mean, dude? It was dumb. But that's literally
really bizarre.
Like it was strange. Like that's the only thing that I really consider like racist that's happened to me. Like I've been very fortunate in my life to not have like experienced anything like police brutality or like something I consider that's like unjust because of the color of my skin.
Right.
And so it's also kind of just hard for me to relate to things that are going on like that, because I don't want to project my situation and how I grew up onto how everyone grows up, because that's just not how life works.
Right.
But it's just hard for me to relate to everything going on when people are like, yeah, I've been like pulled over so many times because of the color of my skin. And I'm like, I've never been pulled over. I also don't drive much, so it's that factor.
Yeah, well, maybe that's why.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. But yeah, it's just like hard to figure out where I fit in all of that, if that makes sense.
That's really, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's so cool that John 12th Planet put together that group. I didn't know he had done that. Mm-hmm. Hearing their stories, did you feel like you got, any new perspective on, their experiences? Did it make you look at your experiences thus far in the industry any different?
It didn't make me look at my experiences any differently, but it made me kind of ready and like cautious of things that might happen later on down the road. Cause I'm pretty new to my career still. Like I haven't been touring very much. I'm just kind of making my way into like being a name people recognize in the scene, and they've been at it for years. And so I think Armani was kind of talking about a time when he was like playing a show or something, or it was like an MC at a show and he wasn't really getting paid like in a timely manner. And he like kept bringing it up. He's like, "Hey, pay me, because like you haven't paid me yet and you said you would." And like there's just like in the back of your mind, you don't want to like reinforce a stereotype of like black men just being angry people that don't like have any compromise or whatever. And so it's like you don't want to be looked at as like the angry black guy, but you want to get paid. And so it's like hard to navigate. And I was like, I didn't think about that. So
yeah, that's a great point. That's also, he's such an OG that back in the day too, I mean, playing shows was a different thing than it is now,
How so?
I mean, when I started out, it was kind of just more the Wild West days, man. There were some great parts to it, but yeah, the fact that it's a bit more above board now, to me, is a net positive.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess I entered the show playing world way past its like birth in the US. And so I haven't been around where it was just like underground raves all the time. Like these are companies that have contracts and things. So
yeah, I mean, there's waves of it, right? Because there's always been shows of some kind or another. But I'd say, it's not really till this decade, this last 10 years, that it really became, this professional level of, a produced show, almost run like a business.
Right.
I mean, it's giant corporations that now own a lot of these big events. And, just by the fact of that, they're going to be run differently than, some man or woman just throwing a show in their hometown for, a few hundred people.
Yeah. It's like the music industry is just over time something I'm just more and more like baffled by. And obviously, as I was like making music and stuff, the music business wasn't on my mind and there was already a lot of questions. But it's almost like as I continue to like find out more about how it works and like how the game is played or whatever, I'm like, this is even more confusing. Like, for example, I literally today is September 4th as of the day we're recording this.
Yep.
But I had just tweeted and like posted about playing Electric Zoo in Cancun in April of next year, as long as COVID cooperates. But like in the process of creating the flyer, like we had like a mock-up version sent to us yesterday, and they sent a second version later yesterday. But the first version, like all of our names were like closer in size together. Yeah. Like they had Nightmare, Sudden Death, Wooly, Asora. The Wooly and Asora were around the same size, and the Nightmare and Sudden Death were bigger. Where it was almost like a pyramid. Where this is going. Yeah. And then my manager was like, all right, here's an updated version. And I look at it. My name is super tiny at the bottom. Wooly's is super tiny too. And then Sudden Death and Nightmare are like huge. And I'm like, what is this? And I was like, could I just post the like one with the bigger names? And he's like, nope, because that's in the contract. And I'm like, this is silly.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, man. I think people would be surprised. I've talked about it on the show before, but it bears repeating. You know, the serious, heated arguments between grown adults that happen over a font size or, you know, the placement of something slightly higher or lower on a flyer.
I get it because it's a business and it's a game, and like the names being bigger is just like a bigger psychological thing. Like you see a bigger name, you think of them as a bigger act, or you're more easy to like recognize it when you're like scrolling through. So it makes sense, but it's also just like, really?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's super annoying as the artist on the come up, right? Of course, that's super annoying. It feels, you know, insulting or minimizing or just frustrating when this is, you know, could be a big thing, and then, you know, it's presented as a smaller thing. All of that kind of stuff makes sense. To me, there's sort of a second, just like more funny, absurd layer of it where, you know, what'd you say, Sudden Death and Nightmare, I know their management, they're good guys and they fight super, super hard for their artists. And I can just, I have a picture in my mind of them typing an angry email, you know, just all caps, you know, these names need to be larger, these names need to be smaller. And to me, that's so funny. Like just I mean, they'll probably the annoyance of it aside.
Yeah. Like it's just,
I mean, it's less funny to you because it's affecting you, of course.
Right. Well, I mean, even just the fact that it's new. Like I knew it was kind of a thing because people have like talked about it before, but this was the first time that I had actually like experienced it. I was like, this is kind of dumb. I'm sure I'll like find a way to joke about how the music industry works as time goes on.
Yeah, of course. And I'm not saying that, you know, you should immediately just find it funny, but just to me, just the idea of grown adults yelling at each other about font sizes for, you know, when the end result is like playing a rave is so funny to me.
It's just how it is.
It is, man. Yeah. And you're right. It's all a business. They're all trying to maximize the results for the people they work with. Which actually, you know, let's bring it back to you, though, because I think that's an interesting way to talk about your evolution on the business side of it as a public figure, as an artist. You know, so when you started first posting up your music, you know, back in the day, and people first started hearing it, how did it evolve to the point where you really started connecting with people you would end up networking with, working with, being involved with, whether it's, you know, management or labels? Was it sort of a gradual thing, or did you have kind of a breakout moment at a certain point?
For the most part, it was very gradual, but there were multiple like breakout moments for sure. I think from the very beginning, I was just kind of making music, putting it on YouTube at first, and then I created a SoundCloud like months later. And the way I started gaining a tiny following was, so this was around the time that Gangnam Style was big, right? So I was one of those guys that was in the comments spamming about my music, and it actually worked to a little extent.
Really? That worked?
Yeah. I got my first few hundred subscribers on there. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, it was huge. Like it was the first video to hit 1 billion views. And so I was like, I got to post my music stuff on there. And it was weird, but it worked. Continued just posting stuff on YouTube and SoundCloud, just like tweeting to my followers and like Facebook posting like, hey, I just released this new song. Go listen to it. And so I did that for a while. And then fast forward to like this whole time I was very slowly gaining a following. And then fast forward to, I think, 2018, or it might have been 2017. But Chime had a remix contest for his song Wait For Me. And I saw that and I was like, I've been listening to Chime since before he was Chime. I want to enter this contest. And so I just made this really fun remix. Like there was no pressure on me. That's something I kind of miss from like the earlier days of making music. Is just I didn't have this sense of pressure or like trying to one up myself or whatever. Yeah. But I made this remix of Wait For Me by Chime, and I like fast forward to the day that he announces the winners, and I got second place, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I started to get a fan base from there, and he really started pushing my sound. He's like, dude, you've got like something unique going on. And I was like, thanks. And one of the prizes for the winning the competition or like becoming one of the winners was a release on his label Rushdown. And so I ended up releasing there in 2018. And then just since then, like I'd used Rushdown as kind of like a place to release because that really like fit the sound that I was developing.
Yeah, and he was the first person to send me music from you, actually.
Really?
Yeah, he was the first time I heard you was through him because he appeared on this show. And he was actually, I think he even was mentioning you when he appeared on here. And then afterwards, I had him send me a pack of music from the label for my radio show, and a bunch of your tunes were in there.
That's so cool.
And that's when I started following you, yeah.
Neat. Yeah, I didn't even know Chime was on the show. I got to listen to that episode.
Oh, yeah, it was good, man. It was a while back now.
But yeah, after that, I just continued releasing on Rushdown. And I think the next big thing was I had created an EP, or no, I created a track called Coma. And I put a clip of it on Twitter. And I was like, I think the only caption was just melodic rhythm has evolved. And I did that strategically because I was like, I need to create a caption that is like, it doesn't give away everything that's happening in the video and is like captivating enough to get people to click it. And so that worked out very highly in my favor. That is definitely my best performing tweet to date. People were retweeting it all over the place. They're like, dude, we want this song. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll finish it. So I finished that. And then we sent it, my manager sent it off to Circus, and they're like, dude, this is great. We want an EP from you. And I was like, okay. And so I put together the Comatose EP behind that kind of concept. And then that released there. And I think that was another big like milestone because that was my first like big label release. And then after that, I sent Reset Environment to Disciple. That was another big kind of boost. Well, that's still like, I'm still seeing the effects of that now. I think more than I realized, releasing my remix for Riot 10 last week or the week before, but very recently, or at least the same day as my EP. So I really need to like post more about that because I kind of like neglected pushing it. But anyway, that released the same day. And I think that had a lot to do with like success. It's just so strange because like, I think I'm in one of those periods right now where I have this big boost because like out of nowhere, I'm getting like offers to do drive-in tours, like multiple of them, the Electric Zoo thing, that's just all coming from like nowhere. Yeah. And so I guess like recent releases are starting to like push my name out there. A lot of people are like following me, retweeting, reposting my stuff that I had not originally expected to like my music. Kill the Noise tweeted something where he was like, this is what I've been listening to over the summer. And I saw like my face on there as my Spotify profile. And I was like, you listen to my music? And he was like, yeah, it's great. I was just like, okay.
Yeah. Well, so this is actually really interesting, right? Because I talk about these moments a lot where you're having a moment right now, right? Like you're starting to pop for whatever reason, whether it's a combination of factors, whether it's just, dropping a bunch of music at the same time, whatever it is, all of a sudden you've got more eyes on you. Right. And in this moment, which I'm sure you didn't exactly plan for happening this way.
Not at all.
How does it feel? Because I think, in these moments, you always think like, oh, well, I'll be ready for it. I'll have this plan. We'll execute the plan. But a lot of times there is no plan, right? Because you can't plan for the moment to happen.
Right.
So for you, how, are you thinking about how you want to sort of act in this moment? Are you going to try to put out a bunch of music? Are you going to be methodical about it?
I don't know. It caught me off guard, to be honest. Like, yeah,
and that's a fine answer.
Like, I was fully prepared this year because of COVID to just like be doing school, not be playing shows, and then I get all these like tour offers, and I'm like, this is like the weirdest time for this to happen. It's like the opposite of what I planned. So I'm having to like adapt. I do have like music that I'm creating that I am trying to like release. I want to keep like a once a month like release plan. That's usually like the safe bet for me. But like just as far as being ready in the future, it's just so strange. Like I'm going on tour in like 2 weeks. The week of the 14th of September. I still need to put together my tour set and that kind of thing. It's just like, I don't know. And especially
doing like what, drive-in shows?
Yeah, drive-in shows.
Yeah.
It's a drive-in tour for support for Riot 10 this time around. But
nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. They I guess after I released the remix, his booking agent actually reached out to us like a month ago or maybe even longer. And he was like, hey, does ASOR have a booking agent? And we were like, no. And so my manager have been talking. He's been putting me on a lot of shows. It's kind of scary, but also cool.
Oh, that's great, man. That's kind of the best way, in my opinion, for a relationship like that to start is, just sort of like try it out, see how it feels. If it goes well, you can kind of naturally evolve it into a more formal relationship.
Yeah. And that's kind of how it went with Landon, my manager, too. In like 2018, I want to say, I released an EP called Guided Wandering on Rushdown. And Landon at the time was a writer for Your EDM. And he was like, hey, I guess Harvey had reached out to him, Chime, because he had already like been in contact with him before. They were like friends. They knew each other. And so he was like, hey, I'm doing a write up on your EP. And he was like, looking through my social media to get stuff to draw off of course. And he's like, I understand that you're a Christian. And I was like, yeah, I actually am. That's like a big part of like what I do with my music. And we kind of bonded over that because he is as well.
Okay.
And fast forward a few months, he's like, hey, I'm looking to get into management. I've like never been a manager before, but like, would you be interested in that? And at the time I had already had like 2 or 3 other people reach out to me as like potential managers. So I was like, let me think and pray about that first and I'll get back to you. Cause I was like, why would I go with someone that's had like no experience when I have other options that have? Yeah. And so after thinking about that, I realized the fact that it's probably going to come a time where something is not going to align with my values. And I want a manager that would understand my decision for like doing an event or not doing an event based off of that. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with Landon. And so we did like a 1-week trial run where he was like, this is what I would do if I was your manager. And then I was like, all right, cool. And then I signed the contract and I'm very glad I did because he's done so much for like my music project. He's the reason I was able to get the Disciple and Circus releases, a lot of uploads on Dubstep Gutter, stuff like that. And just like a lot of really good like career boosts. And I'm very glad I went with him.
Right. Oh, that's awesome, man. That's great to hear. And I think you approached that in a very smart way. There's another thing I talk about a lot is it's very easy to sort of look at the shiny things that people can show off, right? Mm-hmm. And to say, oh, well, this person can offer me access to this, or, they're on this big impressive level. But I think for any artist who's out there listening or watching this, I mean, what you have to look for at the end of the day is somebody who is on your side, somebody who understands and is excited about specifically what you do.
Yes.
Not just somebody who thinks that you would be a good asset to add to what they've got going on, or vice versa, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because you could have someone on your team who has a lot of power, a lot of juice, but if you don't connect with them, if you don't understand what they're trying to do, or vice versa, if they don't understand what you're trying to do with your career, that doesn't matter. All the power in the world, all the juice in the world, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, 100%. Like, especially just like having creative integrity. Like that's a big thing that I've been figuring out over the past like year, maybe just last few months, is like I can't create good music unless I'm in a good mental space and I'm satisfied with the music I'm like creating. Because kind of what happened to me with like Reset Environment was I was just stuck in it and I just didn't like working on it for a lot of the time until that like final push at the end where I was like, okay, I see this is like coming together. But like whenever I'm stuck working on something that I don't like, even if it's like a big opportunity, like if it's a remix for someone and I'm like, I don't really like this original song, but they offered to pay me money to make this remix and something like that, then it's just not fulfilling. And I get in a funk because of that. And I just don't create good music. And so it's just like this endless cycle. But I know if I'm in a good place and I'm like feeling really good about what I'm doing, that it's like going to give me longevity. And my manager like having a similar viewpoint to mine and understanding that about me is like really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting talking about your faith, and I think you've been pretty open that that is a major component of who you are as a person, as an artist. Because earlier you had mentioned that, one reason you liked working with your manager, Landon, is because if there was ever a situation where, your values and your faith led you to one side or the other of a decision, that he would understand that because he shared those same values.
Right.
So I was just wondering if a situation like that had happened to you.
No, I don't think so. Not yet. I mean, it's definitely not out of the question for it to happen in the future. But at this point, I also haven't really played enough shows or like events and stuff like that for that to really come into question yet.
Sure.
But I think it still is like really important for me to have that like confidence that if he sees something that doesn't align with like what I believe, then he'll like be like aware of that,
Yeah.
Like he won't push me to do something that he knows would not be good for me to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's smart to have someone like that around, because I could imagine it could feel, and I'm not saying this is you, but I could imagine it feeling maybe a bit isolating to be sort of very open about your faith in a subgenre of music that is not known for its faith, right?
Yeah. I don't know if it's isolating. It's definitely weird. Like, because there just aren't many, well, there aren't many people that are open about their faith. That might be part of it. But it's just like, it's just so weird to me that there is so, like, the dubstep scene is pretty big. And like, I'd imagine there's more people that are Christians. Maybe there's just not a lot of people that talk about it,
Right.
And like, it's an important part of who I am and important like theme behind all of the music I make. And like, I'm very open about like sharing that with people. I don't feel isolated, but it definitely feels weird because it almost feels like I'm alone. And like, kind of along with that, like, I want to conduct my career in a way that is like a good representation of who Jesus is, right? And you can see that in a lot of different other genres of music. Like, you've got Christian rock bands that tour and do that thing. You've got like rappers that are Christians that do their thing that way. And electronic music, that's just kind of like a foreign concept. And so like, there's not much to draw off of to be like, this guy did it this way, so I'll do this and adapt. It's like completely new. And so
yeah, well, I mean, it's, I was thinking about this when I knew I was coming to talk to you, is there are, like you just said, there are Christian rock bands, there's a Christian metal scene, that kind of thing. And I wouldn't be surprised for electronic music and for dubstep, if it continues to get bigger and evolve and sort of expand, I wouldn't be surprised if those mini scenes or whatever you want to call them started popping up. But then I guess my question for you is that something that would appeal to you? Because if somebody tries to put a label on you as a Christian dubstep artist,
that's
right?
I'm about to get to that. Like, I do not brand myself as a Christian artist for many reasons. Number one, I think when you pigeonhole yourself into Christian music, you limit a lot of opportunities. Two, whenever you hear the phrase Christian dubstep, everyone cringes, including myself. And it's just like, yeah, I want to be just a dubstep producer. I don't want to put that label on there. Like, I'm very open about my faith and the fact that I am a Christian, but I feel like all putting the word Christian on it does is limit you to a different scene that is smaller,
right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's limiting, and I think it's, I think it gives people a perception of you before they know anything about you.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really interesting. I never really thought about it that way, but it's, I think anyone who's just interested in something, people don't want to feel like they're going to be obliged to do anything really if they engage with your art, right? Like people just want to engage with your art and then they'll take from it what they take from it. And,
exactly.
For you, like the act of making music and the act of creating art, do you look at that as an act of faith? Does that play into it? Or is it kind of two separate things that can interact with each other? If that makes sense.
I don't know. I've never really thought about that. They're definitely very connected. Like, I feel a very strong sense of like purpose in creating music. Like, I feel like that's what I'm on earth to do. And that's why I do it. And like, have you
always felt that way?
Yes, for the most part. Well, I mean, except for that like stage when you're a kid and you have no idea what you want to do with life. Sure. Like every young boy, I was like, I want to be a police officer or a fireman. And then I grew up and I'm like, wait, I don't want to do that. And so like the more I've like been into music, the more I realized, I want to make music like my life. And even like college, like I don't want to do a computer science job as like my full-time thing. And that's why I'm really pushing to have music be the thing I do. But back to your question, as far as like how my faith connects to my music, I think it's a really, really tight link because I find music my best form of expression. Like, I guess I'm a pretty, I don't know if emotional is the right word. I think I do express my emotions pretty well, just in general, but I do it best, I think, through music. And I think music is a way that I really connect to myself and to God, and I'm able to express like how I'm feeling about things or just like things I'm pondering. Like, for example, the Reset Environment EP, that whole EP was inspired by the book of Revelation, actually. In Revelation chapter 21, it talks about, it's kind of like the end of the world and what happens in like the new world after this one's destroyed. And it's talking about like a new heaven and a new earth where everything is like made new and there's no more pain. I actually put a clip of that like passage in the end of Hypersonic. But the entire, like the whole EP is kind of like the story of that new world being like created and like brought to completion. It's really interesting. And it's just like a lot of, like, obviously I have no idea what that's going to look like even after reading Revelation. So it's a lot of speculation, but it's just like that wonder of if this world is as like complex and cool as it is now, and God is as creative as he is, what is the new world going to be like? And so that was kind of like the theme behind the EP.
Oh, that's really interesting, man. And what I like a lot about that is all of that is fascinating. And I think, if somebody is maybe looking close enough, right, and reading between the lines, maybe they can pick up on that. Mm-hmm. But then somebody else could engage and listen to that EP and maybe some of it would go over their head and they'd just be like, oh, this is great music. Right. Right. Yeah. And to me, that's what really good art is you can engage with it at so many different levels, depending on who you are, who you're engaging with.
Yeah. I always try to have some sort of depth in my music, like especially with the Reset Environment EP. I think that's when I pulled that off best, because like, so on release days, like you'll always be on socials being like, how are people reacting to this? And on YouTube, I would like look at the comments on the Disciple YouTube channel, and some people would be like talking about how it's so cool that I'm incorporating my faith in my music, and then people would reply and be like, wait, he's a Christian? And so it's like anyone can enjoy it, but like if you understand where I'm coming from and like me, there's like another depth to it. I think that's really fun.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And something you said a second ago really connected with me too, is that, you said when you're on stage playing music and kind of in that moment that you felt really connected to God. And that was, I kind of had a moment there myself hearing that, because I've talked a lot about this on this show about how, to me, I mean, I'm Jewish, but like I'm kind of a bad Jew, and I've never been like super religious at all.
Gotcha.
And but for me, the only argument that made a lot of sense to me for spirituality were those moments on stage, because as a performer, it's undeniable that there is something going on, that there is some kind of connection happening. And that's kind of cool to me, that we can approach it from different ways and still have this same moment that we can understand And for you, that's, connecting to God. And for me, I've interpreted it a different way maybe, but it's still, it's still something. It's still something out there that's not in us. It's something external that we're connecting to. And yeah, that was cool, man. I felt connected to you in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, to clarify, I was talking more about like the process of production than like performance when I was talking about feeling connected to God. But
okay. Fair enough.
I definitely know what you're talking about with the like, playing in a show and you like just feel this sense of euphoria, or like the world's kind of like tuned out, and you're just like focused and like,
and connected too, right? Connected to the people in front of you. Yeah. There's something to that. And to bring it back to what you said, you're absolutely right about the production process too, right? Because sometimes an idea comes to you, or you make a choice in a song you're writing and you maybe don't know where it came from or why you made that choice, right? And to me, that's sort of the same thing as when you're, again, in the moment, accessing the sort of the purest form of creativity. Again, that's sort of that unexplainable thing, right?
It really is. Like the brain has just so much depth to it, and like the functions that it can perform and the way it adapts to the surroundings. Like that's one of the things to me that I just like, life does not make as much sense to me, especially like that complexity of the brain, if I don't think of it from like a spiritual standpoint, like that there was like a creator behind it. Like the brain is just so cool, like especially with things like creativity. How does a set of like electrical impulses and different levels of like chemicals result in like dubstep?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just so cool to me. And that was one of the reasons I like wanted to study psychology and stuff, because that's the stuff I like look up online. I'm really into, like, just for fun, the science of like the reward system, how the brain works, like dopamine, neurotransmitters, that kind of thing. And just like how they all work together to allow the body to function the way it does.
It's all that reward system, right? We make a song we're proud of, that feels good. People respond to it, that feels good. You can play it in front of them. You can share this moment where we're all getting a little high on dopamine. Mm-hmm. And yeah, man, I think there is a certain, I've talked about this before. I mean, I think I'm addicted to playing shows. I think that moment and that feeling I get when I'm up there, I'm absolutely addicted to that. And it's, of course, due to that brain chemistry that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, that's just how it works. Like your brain, I think it's either dopamine or serotonin. I think it's for dopamine. But whenever your brain releases like a really large amount of dopamine for something that it finds like that it wants, then it will remember the things that happened like before and after it to try to get you to replicate it again. So that's like how shows work. That's why people get like hooked on things like sex or drugs even. And like, that's just how the brain is made to work. And obviously that can be like a good thing for things and it can be a bad thing for other things. But
yeah, exactly. Right. That's what I've always said, man, is it's all about sort of training your brain, knowing that our brains work this way, right? And have these tendencies. It's like, how can I get my brain to focus on something that's going to help me or at least not hurt me? Right.
Yeah. It's definitely difficult in like modern times when we have so many like super stimuluses or super stimuli out there to like take our attention and like to exploit our reward system. But yeah, things like social media, like porn, like junk food, all of those things just like take the brain's natural responses to like good things and just like flip it to like get you hooked on it,
And with a lot of what you've just said, it's interesting because some people can have healthy relationships with those things, right? And other people can't. And it's that's another weird thing too, right? Is all of our chemistry is a little different.
Yeah. There's just that complexity there. Like there's so many factors that go into whether or not a person's able to like have a healthy relationship with social media or food. And like, that could be like any number of things, like previous life experiences, just genetic disposition, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I've definitely got some food issues myself, and I feel more connected to people in general when I'm thinking about it that way, is that everybody's got something, right?
Yeah.
And it's all based in the same mechanisms, even if it's not something that I personally can relate to.
Right. There's like that little bit of variance there as far as like what people struggle with or like how much they struggle with it, but everyone's got something. Like we've all got very, very, very similar brain chemistry. Like,
what's your thing, if you don't mind my asking?
So I think as of late, it's been social media and video games. I had to intentionally cut out video games.
I've had to do that before.
Yeah. I when school started, I was like, all right, I'm going to go a month without video games because I don't want it to be a thing where I'm like getting into school mode. I'm really stressed out. So like, I'm just going to play video games, worry about this later, and then just spend all day doing that. And so this month I'm not doing, well, I guess for the last 2 weeks, this is like the third week I've done that. And then after that, I'll be like able to do that. It's weird because that's also like a social thing that I do with friends. So I don't want to like cut it out completely because that's like something I need as well. It's just that social interaction. But I know that it's something that can very easily turn into like something I do too much rather than working on school and music, especially now that I'll be so busy in like upcoming months.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing, right? Is if you've got, it's actually kind of cool to hear that, you know, things are popping off a little for you, and you've got, it's just great to hear about anybody getting booked for shows right now.
Right. Yeah.
but that's really cool, man. And that's something to look forward to for sure. Your experience thus far with touring, are you stoked to get more into that world? Is that something you'd like to, you know, incorporate a lot more, be one of the people who's, you know, going out a lot?
Oh, very much so. Like, I mean, there's multiple angles from it. Like, I am kind of not looking forward to being around my girlfriend as much because that's like, she can't travel with me all the time. That's just how that works.
Yeah.
And so like the more time I spend playing shows, the less time I get to spend with her, which is not fun. But in general, I'm super excited about like touring more because I think the first time I really did that was last summer, actually. I played 2 headline shows, one in Seattle, one in Akron, Ohio. And then I played support for one of Sudden Death's shows at the Ogden in Denver. And that was like, the Ogden show was the last show I played. So it's been like over a year since I played a show last. And so there's that aspect of being a little bit unprepared because I haven't touched CDJs in like 13 months. And so I need to like practice that again at like a friend's place or something. But I've always just loved that. Or I guess not always, but I found that I loved it when I like tried going out somewhere on my own, not with my like parents or anything, and like experiencing a new place, trying new food, doing what I love, playing music. And I think like last summer when I started actually going like around the country playing shows, it built a lot of confidence. Because I think as I grew up in a household where it was pretty strict. Like I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things other people were doing. Like we couldn't play video games, like I talked about earlier. During the weekdays, we weren't allowed to go over to a friend's place, like during the weekdays, that kind of thing. And so I grew up where, like, with the best intentions, my parents kind of were very restrictive in what I could do. And as a result of that, like anyone that grows up feeling like they have to be restricted or like forced to do their homework at certain times and things like that, you grow up with like less of a confidence in yourself. And you're like, so I have to like be taught how to do these things or whatever. And like, that's not even a conscious thing. Like it took me until like way later in life to realize that was the effect it had on me. But I think a really big part of breaking out of that was like going and playing shows on my own. Because I taught myself that I was like able to go travel on my own, get through the airport and all that stuff. And it was weird at the Ogden. I had no plan. Or like in Denver, I had no plan when I got there. And luckily Sudden Death like tweeted at me and was like, hey, let's hang out. And so we did that. But it just like once you have those experiences where you do something that you're kind of afraid of and you don't know if you can do it, you just build that confidence slowly. And over time, I think that had a really good effect on me and how I like feel about myself as a person.
Well, that's beautiful, man. Yeah. I love hearing that because that's, I think in an ideal world, that's exactly what you want, right? Is to be sort of affirmed by those experiences as your career is, you know, doing well and continuing to evolve. Yeah, it's beautiful, man. I like to hear that.
It's really, really nice. And actually, that was the inspiration behind the song Coma. Because like that summer of 2019, it was like a really transformative, I think, summer for me and like how I thought about myself. A big part of that was like going to shows and like proving to myself that I can like do things on my own independently. And I think that's like gotten better and better over time as I've gotten closer to like living on my own after college and like getting more serious with my girlfriend. Like see myself like marrying her in the future and things like that. And so like as time has gone on, I've gotten like more and more things that have like proven to me that I can handle life. And I think that's been really good. But back to what I like very briefly mentioned, Coma was like inspired by that summer and like proving to myself that I can do things. And it was like symbolic of feeling like I was asleep in life before that. And once I realized the like amount of opportunities open to me that I can actually like do, that I don't have to be afraid of, I felt like I was awake after that. And so that was the inspiration behind that track.
Oh, that's cool, man. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, you know, I think another part of that too is that you don't have to wait around for those opportunities, right? They're there. And if if one of them looks good, you can start swimming that way.
Yeah, that's a huge thing that I've had to like figure out lately. And I think a big part of that was my girlfriend pushing me to do that. She's a very driven person. And I think that's rubbed off on me a lot. And it's been really good for me. And I think in general, our temperaments are pretty different. Like we're both pretty goofy people. We have a similar sense of humor. But as far as the way we like go after life opportunities, we're very different. I used to be more of a person where I was just like, go with the flow, do whatever life hands you. And she's like, I'm going to go get this thing. And I was like, man, I want to be like that. And so just like having conversations with her and like seeing her live life, I've been like, you know what? Like it's just, I used to have this mindset where if like something bad, like if I was in a negative situation, I just had no power over it and I just had to like deal with it. But then like, for example, I wasn't making as much money as I wanted with like music stuff. And I was like, I don't have to wait for things to happen. Like I can go seek out opportunities. So I started teaching lessons. I started doing the feedback stream thing, doing the master classes, making tutorial videos for them. And it's just like, if life is not where you want it to be, make it be where you want it to be, you know?
Yeah. Oh man, 100%. That's absolutely right. Especially in the music industry, man.
Oh yeah.
There's opportunities out there, but nobody's going to show them to, nobody's going to bring you over to them.
Yeah. You have to go get them.
100%, man. I love that. Before I wrap it up, is there anything else we haven't talked about? Anything you've got coming up you want to talk about? Anything else you want to let people know?
Let me think. I don't want to waste this once in a lifetime opportunity.
Well, you can come back. We'll do part 2. It's fine.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I am starting to play drive-in shows again soon. I got a tour in a couple weeks and then another one in I think like October. Be on the lookout for those. But I'm also trying to think of something like profound to say right before you end the podcast.
Well, I'm not going to end it just yet. So if you want a second to think, I'll ask you another question, which could be profound or not. It's kind of up to you.
Cool.
But I usually wrap it up this way, which is asking you just a time in your life, and it could be from any time, when in a single moment, music really meant something to you, really had a deep impact on you.
Ooh.
And that's meant to be super broad.
Okay.
There's kind of no wrong answer.
Gotcha. Dang, that's difficult because there are so many of them, but there are definitely some that were more deep than others.
Well, what's the first one that comes to mind?
All right. The first one that came to mind was in marching band, my freshman year of high school. Luckily, I know the name of the piece because I went and looked it up later. But for the third movement, I believe, of our marching show, either the second or the third, we played an adaptation of this piece by, I think, John Mackey, or it might not have been John Mackey. I don't think it was John Mackey. But the piece was called Aurora Awakes. And it was by, I'll have to look it up later, but you should be able to find it if you Google it. And just like that piece itself is so beautifully written. Like I remember like I don't remember which exact show, but we were playing it at a marching show and I just like was overcome with emotion after having played it. And I was like, what is going on? Why is this happening? Because I think part of it was just that experience of like camaraderie and like playing together in an ensemble and like having a really good performance where everyone's like gelling together.
Yeah.
But like definitely look up that piece if you can. The piece itself is like a very quiet piece in the beginning, and it very slowly builds throughout the entire piece to like a climax. And like during the climax part, it like switches keys and is like completely different. And I'm like, whoa, this is cool.
Well, there's a beautiful thing in what you just said, which is, you're talking about the camaraderie of it. And that to me, there's levels of that experience, right? Because you're an individual playing an instrument, right? So you're part of it is that you're executing your piece and you're just playing music, which feels good and crazy. That's just a crazy feeling. But then also you're part of a bigger group and everybody's having that experience. But then collectively, there's a second layer of experience, right? Because you're creating together this piece, and the piece is affecting you at the same time you're creating it.
Right.
And yeah, that's, that's, what could be more special than that? Like, why else would we do what we do than some moment like that?
Yeah, exactly. This is like that human part of music is what makes it music. If people didn't connect to it or feel some sort of emotion from it, it would just be sound. Like, I feel like that's one of the only things that distinguishes music from like just sounds. Is like the amount of emotional connection you get. And that's like reinforced, whether you're creating it or listening to it, by being around other people. And it's just really cool to me.
Okay, A, that was a profound thing, and I hope you feel good about wrapping it up on that note.
Cool.
But B, I'll take it one step further and say, I think that's why your music works. And I think that's why more and more people are getting drawn to it, is there's emotion in it. And I think people can feel it. And man, I'm glad you're doing it. I'm stoked to see you keep doing it.
Yeah,
I'm a fan, man.
It's been super fun, and I want to do it forever.
It's been great talking to you, man.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Like,
thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
It's awesome because like I've listened to your podcast quite a few times before. Like, I listened to the episode with Must Die. I think that's when I was introduced to it. He's been my favorite producer for like forever.
And then I also heard,
he's got a big brain.
Yeah.
And then I listened to the Ray Volpe one as well a while back.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah,
both of those.
Really cool to be on the other side, like talking to you.
Oh man, absolutely. Yeah. And you're welcome back anytime, man. I'm glad we finally connected. And both of those episodes, I'm glad you called those ones out because those were both super fun. I think Must Die is coming back on pretty soon here too.
I'm listening to that one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my guy.
Yeah, right, man. This was super fun.
Yeah, man, this was great. Thank you for doing it.
Absolutely.
Take care, and I'll talk to you soon, man.
All right, cool. Peace, dude.
All right, bye. All right, that's the show. Shout out to Ace Aura. Great to have you on, man. For everybody out there listening, don't forget, Ace Aura's new EP, the Reset Environment EP, is out right now on Disciple Records. He just signed the United Talent Agency. You're going to be seeing a lot more of him. So hit the link in the description to go follow Ace Aura. Keep up to date with everything he's doing. And you can come follow me as well at Willy Joy or at Back to Back Pod on all social media. Or you can email me directly, backtobackpod@gmail.com. I would also love for you to come join the Back to Back Discord server. You can find that link right here in the description as well. That is my server, my chat. I am in there every single day talking to people. We have a great community. If you're a music producer, you can come share your music, share what you're working on, get feedback, network with other like-minded producers, all of that good shit. Or, just come post some memes, come talk some shit. That's what we're here for. We're here for you, and we would love to have you come join us. That's it for this week. As always, if you like this episode, if you like this show, if you like what I'm doing over here at Back to Back, I would love to have your support. And the best way to support this show, it's easy, it's free. All you got to do is spread the word. Word of mouth is how this show grows. It's how we thrive. So every single time you put up a post, tag us in your stories, send a tweet, let people know they should be listening, tell a friend who just loves music as much as you do. every time you do that, this show gets better. You are actually making this show better. The more people who listen, the easier it is for me to get awesome guests week after week. And most importantly, it's a way for us to connect, because every single time I see us getting tagged out there, I'm always going to be reposting, replying to you, just generally interacting with whatever you're putting out there, getting to know you. I love meeting listeners of this show. All right, so look, I think that is it for this week. And for anybody who's made it this far, who's still listening, you're the real MVP. I love you guys. I hope you have a great week. I hope you are happy and healthy and sane. Don't forget, take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, and I will talk to you next Tuesday. For Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.